As much as the painful events that I've encountered um, transformed my life into a purposeful existence in a way. And I could make up my own world in my own head in terms of what that's going to be. And that's what made me survive what I was experiencing in my reality. So I was hoping for something to happen for me to kind of be pulled out of this reality and put into the reality of my dreams. And that happened. First and foremost, followed my mom's guiding words. No matter what, go forward, never look back. You have what it takes. Pain leads to purification. Pain is the purpose. The question is how to go through it joyfully, how to recognize that it is the purpose and it's a joyful purpose.
And ultimately, life is about going back to our essence. And you've
Mm.
truly embraced each shaking
Mm.
up with it in its wholeness, with open heart to allow the light to come in. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our episode of the Happiness Hour. We have been on this journey of accumulating more and more happiness as we speak to people who are on a journey of living true. And each one of them has been lighting up my life with so much love and joy. I'm grateful to all of them. And today I have with me Walid Malouf. Walid is a transformation coach, writer, and entrepreneur who helps first time startup CEOs shift from survival mode to empowering leadership. With a background in sustainability, education, and mindset coaching, Walid draws on decades of experience to guide others through growth and personal transformation. Moreover, Walid's been on one of those journeys which really speaks of moving from adversity to strength. And I'm looking forward to seeing how we can, all of us collectively, can be inspired by Walid's journey to turn our life around and live from the inside out. Thank you, Walid, for being here with me. Welcome to my show. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ashu. It's a pleasure to be with you. And I appreciate you and your work, and I'm looking forward to this wonderful conversation.
Thank you. You have had, one of the most incredible journeys of transforming pain to purpose. Can you share some of the defining moments and some of the most defining or profound insights as you went along this shift? I know it's
That's
a
a big
big
question.
question.
Mm, yes, extraordinary journey, for sure. Um, one one of many extraordinary journeys out there in the world, and one that's been very humbling for me to experience it, and very blessed to have experienced it so far, and continue to. And you speak of pain and purpose. Yeah, I don't know, to be honest, if I transformed intentionally pain into purpose as I was going through the journey. As much as the painful events that I've encountered transformed my life into a purposeful existence in a way, right? So I'm not sure which did what and who did what in all of this, but the correlation is very vivid for sure for me. And it's probably almost equivalent at this point in terms of pain and purpose. And you mentioned defining moments. Yes, definitely. I've had time to reflect on these defining moments, and I'll speak of the context, and I'll speak to the pain as I've understand it to be today, my response to it, and then I'll share with you where I've gotten in terms of the major insight. But I think the first defining moment for me, and it's a defining moment really for everyone, is my childhood years and my adolescence, the first big chapter, right? And the context for me was the following. So I'm born in 1972 in a country called Lebanon. And 3 years after I was born, the country experiences a civil war like it's never lived in its own history that lasts for 15 years. And so all of my childhood and all of my adolescence, I don't have to go through too much details to describe what is. Unfortunately, it's all over the news these days. So there's fear, there's death, there's insecurity, there's unpredictability, there's lack of safety, there's lack of life in general. So that's my exterior environment. Now, the family context is very important also. And I'm born into a loving family where, the saying, too much love can kill applies. Very emotional, very dramatic, and very much into expressing emotions and drama. And so there's a lot of fighting, there's a lot of tension, there's a lot of stress, there's financial lack, there's fighting between siblings, between parents and siblings. And I happen to be born the fourth of four kids, the last, very last in a food chain. It was a decade between myself and my next sibling. And so there's a lot of love, but no attunement. So my emotions, my states of being, what I was going through, what I was feeling, my thoughts around what's going on outside of my house, inside my house, none of that was registering on anyone's radar. The third piece is my social life and school and all of that. I wasn't the most popular at school. I had some friends, but I was definitely not showing up as the most brilliant. Bad grades, couldn't focus, couldn't think, couldn't test well, just not showing up well at all. And so this feeling of not being enough and lacking in some way and not being as good as definitely was there. So again, most of it was related to lack of living, meaning lack of joy, lack of playfulness, lack of being at ease, lack of being calm, lack of being secure. All of that a kid needs to grow properly and to develop naturally. And lack of attunement, my response to all of that context was isolation. So I've isolated myself physically to withdraw from the noise in my household and the noise outside. And I isolated myself also mentally and emotionally by withdrawing from my reality. And the way I did that is by dreaming a future that was radically different from the reality I was living today, every day. And I would envision and see that future vividly. And I would see myself living a different life altogether. Because one thing I had going for me in all of this was a promise from my parents that if the situation in the country continues to be what it was, I'd eventually leave and follow the footsteps of my brother, 10 years older, who had left and landed in the United States. So I didn't know what that was, but I could see what that was on TV. And I could make up my own world in my own head in terms of what that's going to be. And that's what made me survive what I was experiencing in my reality. So I escaped physically and escaped mentally and emotionally.
So a life filled with turbulence, with denial, with dreams, it's a clashing of emotions on both fronts, literally. An inner turbulence and an outer turbulence so intense that the only way
Mm-hmm.
to cope was for you to wall up and just make your own make-believe world and hope. So hopefulness is, I guess, what pulled you through it.
Hope is what pulls.
Yeah.
And so I was hoping for something to happen for me to kind of be pulled out of this reality and put into the reality of my dreams. And that happened. And that was the second biggest defining moment of my life. So at age 17, I leave Lebanon, the war's still going on, and I land in the United States as I was destined to do. So I'm not prepared for this. I'm coming from nowhere. And I don't know the United States besides what I've seen on TV and what I made up to be in my mind. I don't speak the language. My family doesn't have money. I don't have money. It's a very different culture from the Middle Eastern culture. And I need to go to school and make friends and make a living. That's the context. And if you're to ask me, okay, what's the painful element of this? At the time, I'd say it was definitely first and foremost homesickness. Home was not pretty, but home for 17 years old is important. It's family ties, it's friendships, it's culture, it's where you lived, it's what you know. And being pulled out of that place, as hellish as it was still a rip, right? And I felt it. I missed people who understood my language, what I had lived, my experience. The second piece was integration into a very different culture. Learning a language for sure, but with a language comes a way of being, a culture, principles, values, ways of thinking. All of that was new and very different. The identity questioning is very strong at that age. And when you are in between two worlds, it's even stronger and creates a lot of tension. How I responded is first and foremost, followed my mom's guiding words as I left. And those were very clear. No matter what, go forward. Never look back. You have what it takes.
Wow, what a profound statement and belief.
I didn't know better.
Yeah.
I knew that she was right in terms of there's nothing going back to go back to. Go forward. And if she thinks I have what it takes, and I leaned in entirely into the project of creating and building a new identity, the identity of a war surviving kid, hardworking immigrant who's destined for better days and hopefully more success going forward in life. I believed that now that I've survived the worst that ever can happen, death, life is open. And believing is seeing, right? And so I started seeing doors open, life open. I started working 40 hours a week, earned my keep. I lived with a 95-year-old lady who offered me room and board in exchange for company and taking care of her health and her food. And I went to high school and became a 4.2 GPA student on the dean's honor list after being nowhere near that ever. I made it into one of the top institutions, colleges in the country. And after that, the rest was success on success and beauty on beauty. So I've traveled across the world. I've married into a different culture, have a multicultural country, family, kids that speak multiple languages. I've, done 5 different, careers in my life so far. And none of that was in the books for me. None of that. And then we get to the third defining moment, financial bankruptcy, midlife, all my savings invested into very risky stocks, made a lot of money, and lost close to $1 million in about 6 months. All of it. Right.
You sure know how to go home or go big.
um, uh, for the first time in my life, I have to go ask my family and my relatives for money uh, uh, to pay my rent, to uh, secure my family. First time. And first time I have a lack of financial means. Um, so yeah, the pain there is real loss of um, material access, deep remorse, deep regret, deep shame, deep blame, and a first shakeup of the self-image and the identity, and the first instincts of a little bit of self-hate. Questioning started in a big way, but continued. My response, I think that's when I started truly living and accepting, understanding what acceptance of what is truly means, or what humility really means also. And the understanding that financial means and money and ability to spend and to acquire and to consume is definitely not essential for happiness. I've lived it because I've leaned into the joy, the real joy that I was sensing and feeling from becoming a father to two kids and a husband and a builder of an enterprise that is a family, and dived into that. Um, Found a way to survive financially without lacking ability to breathe and to access what is needed for living, without all the jazz, without the glitter, without the shine, and learned that that was fine. Actually, better than fine. The fourth event happened more recently, and that was a business failure or setback or miscalculation that really led me to rethink everything, how I view things, how I approach things, how I operate, how I think, how I feel. The shakeup was too strong. The burnout was too long. The ability to rise up again for the first time was lacking. The response could be either go to waste or figure out what's going on. And this figuring out what was going on led me to understand first a bunch of things that I didn't understand how impactful they would be on my life. The war and what I have lived and the defeats and the wins and all of that also led me to understand that all of these stressors that I've experienced in my life have names like, ADD, ADHD, CPTSD, hypomania, all of that stuff. And the first decision was to try to understand. And once I understood, there was a decision had to be made. What do I do from here? Right. And either I set out to reinvent a new me somehow that continues better, or, abandon a bunch of more dreams I had in my head. There was a third decision that was made, was to stick to that journey all the way until the end. Um, there was pain in the journey, but there was right after the pain, joy in the journey. There was growth in the journey. There was more power coming from the journey and how to live my life every day. And there was a decision that was made to do nothing but that going forward. Just go deeper, learn more, discover more, reach more light, and share what I'm doing with myself, with people who are sort of formatted and wired like me for adventure, with all the traumas that come with that kind of a lifestyle, um, and help them heal and become more powerful, just like I am. And so now we take a step back, and you ask me the fundamental question is like, what is the major insight here? And I think I'll go back to what I started off in the beginning by saying what I've understood from each one of those defining moments is that every time I've experienced a significant amount of pressure and stress and tension and pain and suffering, the person who emerged after that was a, yes, a better person, but more complete person, more expansive person, fuller individual in a way, stronger, more powerful. Pain, in a way, started becoming like a title or a headline for purification, for going back to essence, for going back to that, unconditioned place. And if purification, as I've understand it now, is, life is purpose, and pain leads to purification, pain is the purpose, right? Pain is the purpose. The question is how to go through it joyfully, how to recognize that it is the purpose, and it's a joyful purpose.
I'm going to take a pause here. Walid, made some really, really profound and powerful statements. And I think what's striking out at me most of is how you have repeatedly reinvented yourself. Whether it was hope that held you in good, stay strong, or whether it was your mother's belief in you, or the joy of family, or the faith in that it is possible. And to now coming into a space of understanding really the meaning of life, of purification, that when we go through pain is when we purify more of. And ultimately, life is about going back to our essence. I think it's a journey of gratitude, of recognizing that life externally is here to, like you said, it's here to shake you up to bring you back home. And you've truly embraced each shaking up with it in its wholeness, with open heart, to allow the light to come in. And that is so amazing. It's inspiring. It's really inspiring. Thank you for that, sharing all these defining moments and how you have risen above each one of them.
Thank you, my friend. And you did say the key word is believe is faith in all of that.
Yeah.
Right. The two polarities in everyone's life is faith and fear, and I had both for sure. But the faith that this is about much more than what we see has always been there. Since childhood and adolescence, it's always been more about the death and the misery that I'm seeing. There's been a conviction about that from the very beginning. This can't not be why I was born.
Well, then you're blessed to have had that conviction, and that's what's kept that faith, that conviction is what has kept you going.
I'm very grateful to the war.
Yeah. Uh, I will take a segue into something completely different because you express yourself not just through your story and your words, but through photographs.
Yes.
You express your passion deeply through your photographs, which are on your website. I would love to know more about that journey of yours, of become discovering photography as an expression. And I would tell you here, my husband is a avid wildlife photographer, so I totally would love to know more about your journey.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Photography is my first love, I think, in the sense that it's the first thing that I loved so much. It was my soul. Yeah, I probably loved the craft and the object of the camera uh, uh, before I loved a human being. With my soul was my soul. Now that I think about it, it was early. I was 8 years old when my father gifted me for my birthday my first camera. Um, I had expressed, I think, some interest in pictures and photography. He had also been interested in photography in his life, and he had accumulated a number of cameras, and I toyed with the cameras when I was a kid. And so he gifted me a camera, and I started taking pictures. And I loved it. I loved the act of snapping the picture. I loved the act of carrying the camera. And more than anything else, I fell in love with the act of hiding behind the camera and seeing through the aperture the reality that I wanted and making it, putting it together, light, shadow, framing, and seeing the beauty in everything with that art, with that medium, or looking for it at
Yeah,
least.
it became your lens into life.
In a life where reality was very ugly
Yeah, yeah.
and where I was looking to hide from it.
A
So
life
as
you
I was
wanted.
so as I was saying earlier, I was hiding from all of that, and that medium provided me that opportunity not only to hide, but also to see differently from what the eyes normally would see if they weren't looking for beauty. And that went on from 8 years of age until 21. The camera was my third hand, my third arm hung over me all the time, one or two cameras. And that's where I spent most of my time when I wasn't at home. I was out with my cameras, taking pictures everywhere I went. Love affair that just grew and just, you know, all the way to uh, causing me to consider dropping college in my sophomore year. And I was at Berkeley and then going out and continuing with a photography school in New York. That was the decision. That was a, fork in the road, right? And at that time, I chose not to because of parental pressure, uh, fear of what a career in photography might mean. From perspective of parents who are 30, 40 years older than me and living in different times, different world, different culture, who feel that artist is a tough life struggle, financial lack, and misery, and uh, was convinced of that narrative uh, begrudgingly, hurtfully, uh, big trauma. Uh, and that's when me and photography didn't separate, but became less of an item. And it served me a lot in my life as a medium of peace. And when I wanted to kind of pick up a career in photography, my mind was on, documentary photography and documenting suffering in the world, and with my own experience being very vivid in my mind in terms of how I wanted to change the world at that time through that medium.
For you, photography sounds practically like meditative. There
Oh yeah.
is, it is like a, it's like a more than just a instrument for capturing beauty or suffering. It's a meditative tool for you, which takes you into yourself and helps you tap into that space which you know exists, but you want it to come and how to bring it out. And I would love to invite you to go back into it more and more, uh, into your love affair again, to love yourself and the beauty in the world and share it with the world.
Thank you. Invitation heard and accepted. Thank you, my friend.
You also shared, Walid, about how you understand and you've experienced that happiness and joy is beyond success, beyond money, beyond it's who we are. It's our essence. How do you bring leaders in touch with that essence of theirs, that true essence?
Well, first of all, it's there. There are moments of happiness and there are moments of joy. And there are lots in between them and increasing the frequency of those moments because they're there. The first thing I try to kind of focus on is to point those moments out and to help leaders map out the conditions that created those moments, the states of mind, the thoughts that they were going through, and the states of heart, the emotions that they were going through, and the states of being, the soul, where they were when they were in that particular moment, having that particular conversation, having that particular meeting, making that particular decision, and doing it from a place of calm, from ease, from confidence, with no stress, with joy, with playfulness. Mapping that pattern that creates those conditions helps repeat it. Because most of the time, we don't reflect on what creates those moments, the pleasant one and the unpleasant one as well. We tend to hold on to the unpleasant one longer than the pleasant one. The pleasant ones we tend to take for granted, but once we go back and we decode it, we're able to repeat. And every time we repeat, we're able to deepen. And with time, it starts to become a muscle that is waking up and taking its rightful place. But the start is first helping them understand that this is not something they don't have. It's something they have plenty of in abundance. So it's a good news. It's just how do we access it?
Yeah, how do we change the pattern from, as you said, hanging on to the pain to creating the joy mindfully and consciously in our life by recognizing those source resources within ourselves?
And remembering that happiness is not a big deal in that it's an emotion. It's an emotion. Like sadness. Unlike sadness, it's a happy, pleasant emotion. And it comes from a thought, right? And it comes from a pleasant thought. Pleasant thoughts tend to be attached to expansive beliefs as opposed to limited beliefs, right? And so the trick is to how to become more expansive, to your point, right? Coming back to the sense of self. The more we are in the self, the more expansive we are. And the more we're able to generate these pleasant thoughts and then end up with more happy moments, right? In these happy moments, the frequency of these moments transmutes into joyful states, longer periods of happiness, right? Joyful states. And then joyful states then transmute into joyful traits, character traits. right? Joy is a trait, which is the strongest form of being, the essence.
So, really joy, like you said, very spot on. Joy is a state of being. It is who we are. What practices do you do to bring yourself back or to keep expanding this state of being?
First of all, it's important to say that this business of joy is some of it we control, a lot of it we control, and some of it also is in our DNA and in our makeup, right? In our history before we were born. And I have to say that I'm blessed, truly grateful to have it, that source, that resource in abundance, and to have quicker access to it than most people. I was blessed with a joyful family. Both parents were very emotional, but there's a lot of joy always in them as a baseline. Um, and my reaction to life, to start with, is joy. I meet it with joy, whatever is happening every day. And so the events, whatever happen, tend to impact me less, because I start with that baseline, and then it gets eaten up by the end of the day. But I start with a healthy baseline of joy, right?
Yeah.
And to go to the practices, in the practices, help me remember the essence. Remember that I am joy. It's not a thing I have to create. It's what I am. In the practices, I don't know anything better than meditation, journaling, and I do yoga as well. And I do them religiously, as in a couple of hours every day. And I've been doing that now for a good 6, 7 years. And yeah, it's been my buoy in a way, right? It's kind of like that's what keeps me afloat. Uh, because that's where I do what's a very big deal after knowing, is remembering. That's where I do my remembering, because the rest of the time it's hard to remember the essence. And when I connect with myself, when I meditate, when I do my yoga, and when I journal, I center, I ground, and I go from there.
There is a strength that you live with, uh, and honesty that you live with yourself. And that is so refreshing, in terms of whether it's accepting life, the the good parts, not so good parts, the ugly parts. You've seen them all. You've really been through, or I would say, when you talked about every emotion, there's such an intensity that you've been through and the resilience that you've built up. What do you see for yourself going forward? How would you like to share this with the world?
First thing that comes to mind is the responsibility of continuing to deepen me first, right? So the work on self is endless until the last breath, and for what I do in my life, it's essential. As in the profession I chose to do, uh, is to help people reinvent themselves, just like I have many times in my life, and I continue to do. And that's a serious business. And that's more than reading books and listening to podcasts, and all they're good. But that's experience. And so that's the more I continue to experience, and the more I continue to alchemize, as you say, pain into purpose, the more I'm able to do my job well, of helping people get over who they think they are and reach that who they are in the essence and transform. And so the more I continue to do that, the more I'm able to do that in the world, for sure. Going forward, um, like many, I am very curious about what's going on with artificial intelligence, right? And the advent of a world and an era where intelligence and cognitive power is exponentially multiplied and distributed. And I wonder what the effect is on the human condition and the human experience, which is my work, right? And so far, it's been 4 centuries. We've been on the mantra of I think, therefore I am, right? Since our friend Rene Descartes helped us answer this existential question of who are we back in the 17th century. Well, when we're no longer the only thinkers out there and the only doers, and they're actually better thinkers and doers, that's not insignificant. And that is creating an identity crisis, a collective identity crisis, right? And so when it's not about we think, therefore we are, I wonder where it's going to be. Is it going to be I create, therefore I am, or I am, therefore I am, right? If creating and if being is where we're going to be headed, question then becomes what does that require of us to become? I mean, every artist, every genius, every creator, every innovator from history and modern times will tell you it's not coming from my mind.
It's consciousness. It's from that space of I am.
It's coming from source.
Yeah.
We're all vehicles.
Yeah.
So does that mean that we become closer to our essence after AI? And does that mean that we are on the cusp of, spiritual intelligence after artificial intelligence? So that's where my mind is. That's where my heart is. That's what gives me hope in these times. And yeah, spirituality is where I'm deepening myself for sure.
I totally agree with you. We are in, the cusp or the era of the spiritual awakening, the collective spiritual awakening, not just one here, one there. And it is where we are heading more and more. And we are really blessed to be born at a time when the world is moving and to have the opportunity to witness it and to be in that wave of awakening. It's really pushing all of us to awaken. Yeah.
Truly.
I know we all get very traumatized with the unrest, but that unrest is what is a blessing in disguise.
Pain is purpose.
Pain is pain leads to it, absolutely. I think, I was going to ask you a closing line, but I think your line of pain is purpose and it leads to the purification quite summarizes it for me. Thank you so much for that, for sharing your insights, your journey, and your learning with us, and inspiring many more who are in today's time living in such conflict-ridden environments. For them to see that hope is actually a reality, and you can convert it into a new life. You are really a beacon of that. So thank you again for that.
Thank you, Ashu. My pleasure.